Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The information wars are raging, and real, reliable information is getting lost in a blizzard of BS. BS that's designed to deceive you. And most of the misinformation is not coming from Russian trolls, meddlers, or other foreign governments. Yeah, that's a problem, but most of this stuff is coming from right in our own backyards. In America, it is fellow Americans peddling smears and racism. In China, it's the Chinese government spewing propaganda. And in India, well, here's a quote from Facebook's former security chief saying, in India, the disinformation is being driven by India's political parties. All around the world, this is a growing problem. Hundreds of years ago, newspaper owners and pamphleteers were able to spread lies. The difference now is the speed and the reach and the allure of the internet. Information is being weaponized. Attention is being hijacked. And all of us are really just starting to adapt. It was a lot easier in these days than it is today. The world is very murky, but there is a dividing line, and I want us to keep it in mind in this entire program today. I think it's between the people who are trying to be constructive and careful, caring about truth, accountable to an editor or a boss or someone, versus people who are unaccountable, destructive, caring only about winning the information war. Constructive versus destructive. That is the dividing line. That brings me, of course, to President Trump. Trump creates such a flurry of misinformation that the truth melts away like an ice cube on a summer day. I could show you 100 examples, but here's just one from this week. Out of nowhere, Trump retweeted a really loyal Trump superfan who posted this the day after the Charlottesville riot. She wrote here, "These protests are not spontaneous, they're pre-manufactured by OFA." She means Obama. And then she linked to a Lou Dobbs segment from Fox Business. This is lunacy. A Twitter user who spends all day sharing pro-Trump, anti-immigrant memes, picks up a Fox segment, uses it, to claim white supremacist violence was actually Obama's fault, to take the heat off Trump. And the president retweeted it 2 years later, and no one even bat an eyelash because Trump says so much, and the web is so chaotic, and it's all so crazy that it's just background noise in this never-ending information battle. That's what I mean when I say there's an information war going on. None of this is journalism. These memes, these smears, this crap has no relationship to journalism. But journalists have to grapple with this misinformation muck, what we used to call fake news, actually fake stories designed to deceive you. Because otherwise the result is uninformed, ill-informed readers. We saw this at the White House social media summit that wasn't. Did you hear about this a few days ago? It was a clear stunt by the president. He was ridiculing reporters while inviting in internet trolls and far-right Twitter personalities and fringe radio hosts to the White House, in some ways maybe a campaign rally for 2020. It was tempting to say we should just ignore this event and call it a stunt and move on, but something important was happening. Trump was legitimizing provocateurs and, in some cases, extremists who deliberately spread misinformation. It felt to me like he was preparing his 2020 meme corpse. The folks that make those visual images that spread all across Facebook and go viral. As Charlie Warzel of the New York Times put it, the summit suggests that 2016's meme army was just proof of concept for an information war in 2020. Warzel said, whatever is coming, we're not prepared. I think what he means by we is newsrooms, media companies, the people that try to make sense of the world for you. It felt to me the summit was a campaign 2020 strategy session with Trump's hand-picked press corps. But the attendees don't work for newsrooms. In most cases, they don't have editors who have been trained in journalistic standards. what they do is they promote the president. They promote his brand. They promote his agenda, sometimes through conspiracy theories and misinformation. Now, I'm not trying to lump everybody in together, but that is what we see oftentimes on the pro-Trump web. Now, at the same time, disinformation knows no political party. There are liberals, there are Democrats getting away with all sorts of smears as well. But we see it constantly on the right. People like Jim Hoft, he's the founder of the right-wing website called the Gateway Pundit. Just one of many examples of a website that specializes in this kind of misinformation that confuses people, okay? Putting up lies right here, saying that recently Obama was responsible for removing the citizenship question on the census. That's obviously not true. It's false. There were lots of other are examples on this website of smears and false information that's been spread. But the Gateway Pundit is just one of many examples of this. Here's the bigger story. And you got to be honest, I want to take a minute here and try to talk you through this before we bring in the panel. These smears, these lies, this misinformation that comes mostly on the right from pro-Trump websites, Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, supported by television hosts, radio hosts. They are softening the ground for straight-up racism out of the president's Twitter account. And that is what we are seeing today. This is one of the president's most recent tweets. Straight-up racist, talking about progressive congresswomen. Let's read part of it here. He says, "It's so interesting to see Democratic congresswomen," we'll put it back up in a sec, who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, now loudly, viciously telling the people of the United States how to run the government. Here's the key part. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Now, he's probably talking about Representative Ilhan Omar, who was born in Somalia, who fled to Kenya, and then came to the United States when she was 12 years old. There are other Democratic congresswomen who she is associated with, who she is friendly with, all of whom were born in the United States. But the president's talking about Democratic congresswomen who need to go back to where they're from. It's 2019. We're 2.5 years into the Trump presidency, and his racism is becoming more obvious, more frightening. There are millions of Americans, black and brown Americans, who know exactly what he means when he says, go back to where you came from. They've heard those words on the schoolyard, behind their backs at work. That kind of racism that Americans have been fighting against for decades is coming from the president's Twitter feed. There's no bigger story in the country right now. And I want to relate this to the media by pointing out that the ground has been softened for this stuff from the president by this collection of pro-Trump bloggers, radio hosts, television stars, who somehow think it's acceptable to attack fellow Americans like this. Let's talk about these information wars and a lot more. Again, a special edition of the program, and I've got a special panel to start us off. Former senior advisor to national security advisor under Obama, CNN national security analyst Sam Vinograd is here. Robbie Suave is an associate editor at Reason magazine, and he's the author of Panic Attack: Young Radicals in the Age of Trump. And from Vox, senior politics reporter Jane Coatston. Jane, let me start with you. The president's tweets I view as part of this information war that's raging. And obviously he posts so much so often, and that's part of his strategy. But are today's tweets different at all?
I mean, I think we can all remember the Judge Curiel incident of 2016 to know that this is not new, that President Trump's views of who is adequately American are, shall we say, different from my own. But I think that it's reflective of this understanding that to criticize this country means that you are no longer able to be a representative of this country, which is a very strange thing for someone who in 2015 described America as a hellhole to do. And I think that it's interesting, though, that this hasn't changed. You know, this is the same language he used about Judge Curiel of Indiana. This is the same language he's used again and again and again.
You don't think the racism is getting more explicit in some cases?
I think if you've been paying attention, this is just kind of the basic way in which he talks about people with who don't follow him. You know, I think that there's an understanding of Trump, and I think one of the challenges we have is that you're going to start seeing a lot of people attempt to defend these tweets by arguing that no, he just meant this one representative, he just meant this. Maybe he did mean go back to Cincinnati, but you're going to start to see that back and forth, But the thing is, what is at the root of this is an understanding that if you criticize how this country works, you are no longer you're no longer acceptable to the president. You're no longer available to continue in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, or as American as the rest.
Right.
Robbie, how do you view it?
Yeah, I think it's a shameful that this faction of the pro-Trump right has seemed to actually embrace identity politics, something the right has long criticized as being bad for this country. But they have embraced it as now, if you look different or you're from somewhere else, that defines you, and thus we're going to criticize you on that grounds. And that's a thing that the right used to be really against, or at least claim purportedly to be against. And now it's driving and defining so much of their criticism of other people. And again, Trump ran on that, was like, I'm going to be anti-identity politics, political correctness is killing us, all that kind of stuff. But of course, like so many criticisms of that, he is what he purports to criticize.
It is Monday, the 15th of July of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. We sliced and diced everything that we've had left over, and I gotta tell you, there was a lot to consume over the weekend, let alone latent racism. Boy, I keep telling people we're doing a full circle Lee Atwater. We're right back to being able to say the N-word again. We're so close, almost there. Lindsey Graham is making the rounds, defending Trump's racism, saying those women hate our country, they hate it. While Lindsey and Trump and all of the GOP pretty much hate America and Americans, and they talk about it every single day. We hate them. Well, it's a white genocide in their minds, and they've got to take drastic measures, any means necessary. I don't know, even putting on a white hood. Sure. Let's recognize Bedford. Why not? Such a great hero of the South. All right. We're doing a full circle Lee Atwater. Right back to starting off with the N-word. No coding. Nope. Don't have to put it in code. Spell it out. And usually they spell it out. It starts with a K and ends with a K, and there's a K right smack dab in the middle. All right. Okay, that's the big, to me, that's one of the big news stories out. I did see a diplomat from China going full on racism too, talking about how when blacks move into a neighborhood and in like DC or anywhere in America and the property values go down, and then followed up with a tweet about other countries that let, I don't know, certain ethnic groups come in and watch their property values go down. I don't know. I suppose this latent racism will come to the fore when you're trying to appeal to a racist U.S. president during a trade war. Okay. Yeah, blame the black foreign white devil. Yeah. All right, racist much? Racism exists everywhere in the world. All right. Which always makes me laugh when somebody says Trump can't be racist because he has Elaine Chao as a transportation secretary. Okay. First of all, the Chinese can and are quite racist as a nation. I mean, look at the way they treat the Uyghurs. Complete racial animosity there. Tibetans, same thing. Now, we look at those as cultures and nations rather than, a racial identity. But when you're a racist, those delineations are rather stark. Just like black and white. Even when we can't see it. All right? Like your eye isn't quite blue enough. We're going to have to make you a slave. I don't know. Is that human nature? I don't think so. But there's certain levels of people who get away with it because other people are afraid to say or do anything about it. We as Americans are calling out Trump and his team and their racism. But we're not really Americans in their minds, which is a problem because we consider them to be Americans. I mean, where do we send them back to? And where do you send Trump anyway? Is it Germany or is it Sweden? Since we are true Americans, we would never want to inflict that on our friends. I mean, send him to Russia. He loves it there. He knows more about Russia than he knows about America. So, the Gestapo raid started a little bit earlier than on Saturday and Sunday. Just doing, I don't know, maybe they're doing a soft opening. Some of the narratives, the recounts, the descriptions of what happened this weekend sound eerily familiar to what happened to Anne Frank and her family in Denmark. Oh, yes. That's where we are. We're rounding up the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. We're just taking them someplace where we can be compassionate with them. And we'll have all sorts of compassionate films of them gardening, for instance. The parallels are not only eerie, they only work on people who don't know, well, anything. Don't care to know anything. You show a classic historical photograph of the emptying out of the Warsaw Ghetto, and someone says, what's that? What's the story behind that? What's the attribution? You never saw this? Okay. The less you know, the less you will know. And I know knowledge is power. And what happened this weekend was that so many young people, the Anne Franks out there, did not open the door. Know your rights. You don't have a piece of paper signed off by a judge, you can't come in here. A 12-year-old recounted exactly that. Banging on the door, 1 a.m. in the morning. Oh, just come out here. We want to talk to you. No, I'm not opening the door. We don't want to come inside. We just want you to come out here and talk to us. No, I'm not opening the door. Show me a warrant. Harangued her for quite a while. Then they left. And then about 5 a.m. in the morning, they surrounded the house with more guys and flashlights and banging on all the windows and stuff. And the kid and the parents hid upstairs in the attic, in the dark, afraid. Just like Anne Frank and her family, except they were kind of like in a basement or in a crawl space below. No. I apologize. She was in a sort of secret room, more in the upper reaches of the building. Huh. Well, maybe I should finish my short story, The Diary of Anna Francisco. I think I've finally got an ending. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, since we've taken up almost half of the show with the top clip of Brian Stelter finally admitting, that Trump's racism is becoming more frightening and more obvious. Hey, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, if you hate the U.S. women's soccer team's World Cup party, you are a cop. You are. Indicted GOP Congressman Duncan Hunter sent a racist campaign mailer while out on bail. Yeah, his Democratic opponent might be Muslim. So, if you're out on bail, might as well get some funding. And what better way to raise funds on the right than to, just be an overt racist? And the latest probe of the NRA could cost the organization its nonprofit status. Nonprofit? Wow, what's socialist? After the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where police in Moscow detained dozens of opposition candidates and their supporters, protesting being kept off the city council ballot. And UK police identified the suspect in the leaked memos that called Trump inept, dysfunctional, and a diplomatic vandal. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, right there where the social media scroll is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. She and Ricky are on their way back from Philadelphia. They might already be home by now, but not ready to actually do... come on, they need a rest. They were in Netroots Nation 19 and did stellar work, and thank you so much. Got quite a bit of interviews lined up that we weren't able to play over the weekend, but stay tuned for those in the coming days, weeks, and months, maybe years. Nonetheless, we're looking forward to Denver. That's a lot closer, so I think maybe I'll go ahead and plan on getting to Denver this next Netroots Nation, which will be the 20th. And wow, I remember the very first one when it was called Yearly Co's in Las Vegas. So many years ago. Time flies. Well, thank you, Kelly, for taking care of Netroots Nation. And you can monitor the chat room link when you get to monitoring it. If you would then take a look, you being the audience, to the leftish of the page, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is the Patreon link, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Though what really we keep this endeavor going is what comes out of our own pockets, but we really are unable to do this without you, because you are our largest and even biggest contributor, and we thank you for that. If you could afford a coffee latte, coffee-type drink once a month, the cost of that, push those funds our way. And we can take those dollars and stretch them beyond compare. And we are very experienced at it, because with your help, we've been doing this for the last 8 years. 8 years of continuous, 24/7, 365 broadcasting. There, I got that out. That's the ratio. And thank you so much for your generosity in keeping Resistance Radio resisting as the founders originally intended, way back even before the Constitution was constituted. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, because there is that social media scroll, which happens to be a Twitter scroll, you can do so by following us at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Though I should say YouTube banned the show on Friday in parts of Europe because they objected to the Green News Report having an 8-second clip at the very end of their block during our break of Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Blocked in Belgium and other places in Europe. Wow. 8 seconds. I thought that was totally within fair use. And it was from somebody else, but there you go. First time that's happened. I'm going to have to keep track. Okay. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is Out of Think Progress, and by the great Lindsay Gibbs. On Wednesday morning of last week, Megan Rapinoe, dressed in her World Champion 2019 shirt, massive red-frame sunglasses, and her now signature pink hair, was on a float in the ticker tape parade in New York City, surrounded by teammates, fans, and because nothing can be perfect, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Darn. She had been partying for 3 days straight with her teammates ever since the moment they won their second consecutive and fourth overall World Cup championship in Lyon, France. But the party was far from over. Her left foot was propped high in the air, putting her left knee about parallel with her shoulder. The World Cup trophy was in her left hand and resting atop her knee. In her right hand was a bottle of champagne. She turned to her friend, Ashlyn Harris, a backup goalkeeper for the U.S. women's national team, whose documentation of the group's post-victory celebration bender will go down in the annals of women's sports history, and told the whole world through Instagram stories, "I deserve this. I deserve this. Everything." Indeed they do. To some, that might be considered an off-the-cuff, light-hearted statement, but it was far from that. This was an earth-shattering declaration, a pointed rebuttal to everyone who has ever told women that their worth was tied directly to humility and modesty. A mantra for women everywhere who feel pressured to tone down their happiness to make others more comfortable, to turn down compliments or brush off accolades. It was the opposite of thank you and a complete rejection of I'm sorry, a phrase that most women utter on average 100 times a day, often to nobody in particular as they merely move around in the world. It was a motto that summed up the entire World Cup run of the women's national team. 3 months before the tournament began, they sued U.S. Soccer for equal pay, taking the fight for equality onto the biggest stage in the sport. Once in France, they smashed record after record and celebrated with abandon at every turn, drawing massive amounts of criticism for being too demonstrative about their happiness. They did not apologize. And why should they? Because in this reporter's opinion, when the men score, and I'm not talking just about the U.S. men, I'm talking about the whole soccer world of men, they will tear off their shirts. They will run around the field screaming like a banshee. They'll ape like a baboon. They'll jump on the field and hump the field and undulate like some sort of weird sexualized inchworm. And that's okay. But if the women sort of like fist bump each other after a score, that's just so unsportsmanlike. God, I hate that. Well, this backup goalkeeper, Harris, who's been keeping the chronicle on Instagram, do check that out. Her chronicle of this World Cup party will go down in the annals of the Jim Bouton School of Sports Chronicles. Rest his soul. I'll just cut to the chase here. The women have made a statement. They are the best athletes that America has to offer. They've continuously won, and won with superior talent and strategy. I love that team. So let them celebrate. And, above all, pay them equal pay. Hey, it's Monday. We'll get to our break when we get to it. It's Monday, and that's our excuse, and we're sticking to it. This next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of Share Blue Media by Dan Desai Martin. Representative Duncan Hunter, a repug of California, is once again embracing racism and sowing hatred as he gets an early start on his 2020 re-election campaign. Did the whole GOP get together and say this is what we're going to have as strategy? Then from here on out, these will be our talking points? Wow. Could be. Hunter sent out a campaign mailer linking his likely Democratic opponent, Amar Kampa-Najjar, to a 1972 terrorist attack on Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics, allegedly carried out by Kampa-Najjar's grandfather. The mailer insinuates that Kampa-Najjar, a Christian who was born after his grandfather died, along with Representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who are both Muslim, are linked to terrorists and a threat to America. Wow. Duncan, are you Irish? I wonder what your political insinuations might be. Maybe we need to keep a lookout for you. Well, back in the day, Irish were looked after quite closely and maligned in somewhat the same way as the congresswomen are being maligned. But let's put a lie to bed here. Okay, Irish slaves? No. Indentured servitude was completely different than slavery. Let's be clear. Now, Kampa-Najjar's campaign fired back at Hunter's clear effort to stoke racist and Islamic fears. The closer Duncan Hunter gets to his criminal trial, the more absurd his lies and racist attacks become. The Kampa-Najjar campaign said, at this point, it's pretty clear that Congressman Hunter has lost all ability to tell the difference between right and wrong, fact and fiction. It's one scandal after another, one embarrassing news story after another, one potential crime after another, one courtroom appearance after another, and one lie after another. Of course, Kampa-Najjar was referring to the fact that Hunter was arrested last year on allegations that he illegally used hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign funds to live a lavish personal lifestyle, including international family vacations, flying his family's pet rabbit across the country, and as the investigation has turned out, all that to keep his wife quiet because he was also financing numerous mistresses who happened to be lobbyists on sex junkets. But it's okay, since they were sex junkets. It's like government business. Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. On Friday, the D.C. Attorney General formally issued subpoenas requesting financial info from the NRA and its charitable arm, the NRA Foundation, the latest in a long line of piling issues threatening to bring down the entire organization. The subpoenas are focused on whether or not the NRA breached D.C.'s nonprofit regulations, If the NRA refuses to comply with the demands, or if the D.C. Attorney General Office finds the NRA in breach of nonprofit regulations, the DA's office can bring court proceedings seeking to dissolve the NRA in its entirety or to place the organization in receivership. Well, I don't know, give it to the Brady Foundation. Let them take care of it. The subpoenas are the latest in a litany of developments ratcheting concerns about the NRA's financial future and the future of the organization itself. Well, these extremist organizations usually are brought down by financial crimes and means. The Nazi Party in the Northwest, after Metzger and his group had killed a black man on the streets of Portland, were made to pay fines in which that whole organization was dissolved. Now, this document demands are amidst a background of roiling internal strife and ongoing questions about the NRA's involvement in Russian interference efforts in 2016. On the Russia front, Russian national Maria Butina was jailed earlier this year for failing to disclose she was working as an undeclared Russian agent. Well, that's because when you're a spy, you usually don't tell people, look, I'm going to go spy and schmooze with NRA higher-ups, all the while helping organize trips to Moscow to meet with sanctioned Russian officials. Well, she had collaborated with a now sanctioned former Russian official to plot out how best to continue growing close to the NRA. She is due to be released from prison later this year and will likely return immediately to Russia. I'm sure she will. As a source familiar with the congressional investigations told Think Progress, Senator Ron Wyden is planning to issue a formal report on the NRA's interactions with Russia over the coming weeks. The questionable links between Russia and the NRA were first highlighted by Think Progress in 2016. No wonder they've been pretty much blackballed on Twitter and elsewhere. It's such a drag. All right, that's how the other side works. They cheat, and they cheat. All right, let's get to our break finally, and when we come back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Little Boxes. This Take Two is a hard one for me because I didn't want to write about The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Why not? Well, first here are the facts. In Last Black Man, writer/actor Jimmy Fails plays a character named Jimmy Fails. An African-American, he lives with his also black friend Mont, who is a visual artist and playwright. Mont befriended Fails when Fails was a teen and homeless, and now the two are inseparable. Homes are a fulcrum to Last Black Man, in which Jimbo and Mont continually go to the Fails family home, one of those classic Frisco Victorian houses, which Jimmy's father lost, leading to the dissolution of their family. Even though the neighborhood, once San Francisco's Harlem, is now gentrified and white, Jimbo, with Mont in tow, regularly sneaks onto the property and maintains the house in spite of the consternation of the white mature couple who are now living in what they call their home. Last Black Man is the first full-length movie by longtime friends and lifelong San Franciscans, Fails, and director/co-writer Joe Talbot, based on incidents in Fails' life. They both have interests in and connections to classic Hollywood, which is probably why Last Black Man feels simultaneously from another filmmaking era and yet still very much of this cultural moment. Watching this film felt like reading James Joyce's Ulysses. It was lyrical and thematically dense and ugly and beautiful and mysterious, and so deeply rooted in a time, place, and culture that I did not know. Oh, to be San Franciscan and watch this movie. But that's as much as I want to say. The movie speaks to so many things. One of them significantly is how people are encaged in boxes, homes of course being a physical manifestation of such. So it seems more than the usual disservice for me to fit this film into some kind of blithe and snide critical box for you. Just go see it and we'll find some cookie-cutter, faceless, corporate yuppie, trendy hipster, Wi-Fi hotspot, gentrifying coffee shop, and we'll talk about it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at taketwomoviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky.
So what is the connection between AI and rhinoceri? Surprisingly direct.
Bernard Mayerson, Chief Innovation Officer at IBM. He spoke recently at the Cooper Union here in New York City as part of a panel discussing the intersection of artificial intelligence, AI, ethics, and healthcare. So where do rhinos come in?
As you know, poaching rhinos is a huge problem. The rhinoceros horn represents about 30 years of revenue, 30 years of income to an individual in sub-Saharan Africa. And that is why, basically, if you manage to kill a rhino and get a horn, essentially it's like winning the lottery. Unfortunately, it's not so good for the rhino, not to mention you deplete a precious species yet again. And poaching is a huge issue. What people don't know is about 1,000 gamekeepers, the UN kept numbers until I think 2014, have been murdered by poachers in order to get at the animals being protected. This is about humans. Well, how do you basically protect rhinos with AI? That's a good question. Somebody said, being a kid who grew up in the Bronx, my thought is, well, you put a collar on the rhino and analyze where they are, their travel patterns. And the guy who ran the reserve in South Africa sort of laughed, said, this does not help.
That's the Welgevanden Game Reserve. Back to Meyerson.
I said, why? He says, well, when the rhino stops moving, you'll know it was dead. That's really not helpful. Obviously, you have a better idea. He says, yeah, what you do is get a bunch of animals that are easily spooked, like gazelles, antelope, that sort of thing. And what you do is you collar them. And you looked at that, and we thought about it, said, that's brilliant, because they become sentinels. Because you see, when a poacher enters an area, that it will encounter these creatures. It's not going to encounter rhinos. They're by far more rare. When it encounters the creatures, like any other animal, they spook and run. Where does AI come in? Well, it turns out when you have these collars on them, there are really a bunch of reasons these animals run. They migrate. Some leopard is trying to make lunch out of it. And yes, they're spooked by, somebody who's entering in a truck to go poach. You have to know the difference. And it turns out, by looking at the pattern of movements and looking at historic data, we were able to tell the difference between each of that using a system that essentially employed machine learning to separate, these are incidences where we're running into poachers. These are incidences where we're actually just, there's a lion trying to make lunch out of this poor animal. The bottom line is, by doing that, we were able to spot the poachers when they were nowhere near the preserve, much less on the preserve where the rhinos are. And this avoids the kind of conflict where people ended up dead in large numbers, not just the rhinos. The idea is nobody dies. You don't want the poachers to die. They are desperate. You don't want the rhinos to be killed. We lose a species. And, of course, the people who are incredibly brave protecting these animals, it really was an amazing thing to us, because at the end of the day, it worked. And that's the kind of thing where, AI used sensibly adds value that no human could possibly have achieved. It's not just about healthcare where you're trying to help somebody diagnose a better way to live. You're talking about saving lives in large quantities. So, I consider the fact that we're trying not to have 1,000 of these caretakers murdered a very high bar for healthcare.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
On a New York City subway, you can't miss the ads featuring phallic cactuses, both flaccid and erect, which promote erectile dysfunction medication beneath the slogan, Hard Made Easy. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. That's how the lawsuit brought by Dame Products against the New York City Metropolitan Transit Authority begins. The legal complaint then goes on to cite many other examples of ads for products intended to provide sexual satisfaction for men. Here's the rub. The MTA has refused to allow Dame Products to advertise its products that promote sexual wellness for women, vibrators and stimulators, with double entendres in the ad copy mild by comparison with the others, one tagline being, "You come first." Some of the ads rejected by the MTA, we should note, appear on New York City kiosks and in bus stops. The lawsuit alleges that the Metropolitan Transit Authority's decision to reject Dame's advertisements reveals its sexism. The lawsuit claims that the MTA's Victorian view of female sexuality and its decision to censor the advertising is an affront to the First Amendment that cannot stand. As the headline for the New York Times op-ed piece in part about this lawsuit by Jackie Rotman, founder of the Center for Intimacy Justice, read, quote, "Vaginas deserve giant ads, too." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, and we are going all the way back to the year 1381. That was the day John Ball, the leader of the Peasants' Revolt in England, was executed. Due to the plague, the Black Death, in 1348, many peasants had died. Land was plentiful, and laborers were scarce. The authorities responded with emergency legislation, the Ordinance of Laborers in 1349, and the Statute of Laborers in 1351. These laws fixed wages at pre-plague levels and punished employers trying to outbid their competitors. Local lords had the right to prevent serfs from leaving their manors. To raise money for the ongoing 100 Years' War with France, Parliament levied a new tax on every person over the age of 14. This was especially unpopular among the peasant class. The church sided with the wealthy landowners. As a result, some priests rebelled against the church's hierarchy. John Ball was one of these rebels, and for his rebellion, he was imprisoned at Maidstone Castle. The initial outbreak of the Peasants' Revolt occurred in 1380. The people rose up against the new tax. One tax collector was beaten and driven from the village of Fabe. The Chief Justice, sent to calm the peasants, suffered a similar fate. Word spread, and uprisings occurred throughout England. Rebels in Kent besieged Maidstone Castle and freed John Ball. Troops were dispatched around the country to suppress the revolt. John Ball was hung, drawn and quartered in the marketplace, as an example to any other potential rebels. The Peasants' Revolt was crushed, but Parliament gave up trying to control peasant wages and stopped collecting the poll tax. Many peasants were now considered free men, no longer owned by landowners. All of these things helped to end the feudal system.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 64 degrees Fahrenheit, slated for a high in the mid to upper 80s. And that should be about true. We were a bit warm over the weekend. Saturday was in the mid-90s and muggy. So yesterday, Sunday, wasn't so terribly bad. Oh, hope you had a good Bastille Day. I really do. Mine was quiet, except for, the ice raids. And let's not forget about the big blackout in New York. Now, imagine a couple of things here. One is, how long has Puerto Rico been without power? And the last time New York City had a major blackout, Son of Sam was doing his business. I wonder if there is a coincidence One never knows. Well, back here on the local front, we will be under partly cloudy conditions. Winds are right now out of the west-southwest, light and variable, but will be shifting in a couple of hours out of the west-northwest and picking up at their usual 5 to 10 miles per hour, and will continue so through tonight and tomorrow. I forgot to mention, and if I did, I apologize for repeating, but regardless, overnight lows will be in the upper 50s to low 60s for the next week, about the next week or longer, as well as the daytime temps will be in the mid to upper 80s. So that sounds good to me. Grass pollen is still high. The air quality index is holding steady in the good range at 14 parts per million. And that daytime UV index remains very high at 9. So I'll be a broken record. Take care if you have numbers in that range wherever you are. Take care. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.9 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 75%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Yes, it's an aggregate. It's an aggregate of many personal weather stations from all over the world. So the person, because it may not necessarily be a fellow, just to be clear, the person in London is registering at this very moment 70 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy, but you know it's in Celsius, but we're in America. France is 75 and sunny. Rome is 63 with rain, and they do have a flood warning, so take care. Kiev is 65 degrees with a light rain shower. Kabul is 87 degrees, fair but windy. Hong Kong is 83 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 70 degrees with showers in the vicinity. Sydney, Australia is 50 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And New York, New York is 79 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny as the apple can be. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Vladimir Soltykhin of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Police in Moscow detained more than 25 protesters at a rally to demonstrate against a ban on opposition candidates running in elections to Russia's capital parliament. Opposition leaders cried foul after Moscow's election commission said most of their sponsored candidates failed to secure the required number of signatures to participate. The commission has yet to officially announce the list of legitimate candidates for the September 8th vote to the 45-seat parliament. Now, this is also called the Moscow City Council. For some reason, I don't know why. Ilya Yashin, a critic of Vladimir Putin and several other activists, had called for a meeting with the voters on Sunday, an event which transformed into a march to the Moscow City Mayor's office and then to the headquarters of the Election Commission. Yashin said earlier on Sunday the Election Commission's allegation that many of the signatures supporting him were rigged was an absolute fraud. A police spokesman said more than 25 people, including some organizers of the protest, meaning opposition candidates, were detained in the center of Moscow. They have not responded to police's command to stop their actions. They are being bused to police stations for further inquiries, a spokesman said. Not quite like that, but in my rendition they did. The participants shouted anti-government and anti-Putin slogans, urging the authorities to register their candidates. But obviously, anti-Putin speech is not free speech. Where have I heard that before? There is a history of anti-Kremlin activists being denied access to run for the parliament seats or presidential office. Alexei Navalny, a prominent opposition leader, was barred from running in the 2018 presidential election after officials ruled he was ineligible to take part due to a suspended prison sentence. Convenient. The Moscow City Election Commission was not available for comment because their actions tell us everything we need to know.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees, and why wouldn't they be anonymous with this story? From Reuters, bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The suspect behind the leak of confidential memos from Britain's Washington ambassador, which sparked a major diplomatic rift with the U.S., has been identified. The Britain's Mail on Sunday published memos from Kim DeRoche, in which he described Donald Trump's administration as inept and dysfunctional, prompting an angry response from the president and causing the envoy to announce his resignation. British officials have launched an inquiry to find the person responsible for the leak, and counter-terrorism police said on Friday they had launched a criminal investigation. Well, in this reporter's opinion, they should give that person, and it could not necessarily be a fellow, just to be clear, give that person a medal. In fact, I think the Queen should knight them. According to the Sunday Times, which cited unnamed government sources, a suspect has been identified, and suggestions that it could be the result of a computer hack by a foreign state had been ruled out. They think they know who did the leaking. It is now a case of building a case that will stand up in court, said an unnamed government source, because why wouldn't they be unnamed? I mean, it is this story after all. Britain's most senior counterterrorism police officer had warned the media not to print any more leaked documents, saying it could breach the Official Secret Act. However, he was widely criticized by editors and politicians, including the Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt and ex-London Mayor Boris Johnson, the two men battling to replace Theresa May as Prime Minister when she steps down in just over a week's time. It cannot be conceivably right that newspapers or any other media organization publishing such material should face prosecution, Johnson, the frontrunner, said. Very ironically, this reporter might add. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to be broadcasting all day and all night. In fact, we are going to meet up here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesday, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.